Good day, strategy gamers, and welcome to another episode on GMT's game Downfall, Conquest of the Third Reich. This will be the first video in a series of 3 shorter videos that provide a video walkthrough of the examples of play found in the rulebook for Downfall, Conquest of the Third Reich. So the examples that we're going to be going over here today are not my own creation, they're from the game itself, but felt these would make some good video tutorials on some of the mechanics about the game for those who prefer to digest this via a more digital medium. So the first example that we're going to be going over describes a lot about the combat mechanics of the game and how to resolve battles at this strategic level that the game represents. And the first example is just titled The Battle of Stalingrad. As you can see pictured here, we have the Axis forces sitting in Stalingrad, about to be encircled, surrounded by Romanian forces on the flanks protecting there, and the Soviet forces really coming in from all directions ready to try to take the city. In this example, we're the Soviet player, we're the active player, and we have the initiative because on the initiative track our Soviet marker is the lowest value on the initiative track, which means it's our turn. We get to play. Now, in this example on the action track, there's probably a number of different orders that are available to the Soviet player, but we're going to pretend that we have chosen to play a combat order, an attack order, and that's represented by this counter here. And just to detail this a little bit, the 3 with the star in the red box represents the number of battles or combat actions that we can conduct as the Soviet player during this turn. The 2 icons below, which demonstrate different unit types, identify what types of units are allowed to conduct the combat. Now, in Downfall, when you have an order for attacks or battles, it does not mean you have free reign to choose any unit that you want to attack with. You have to actually make sure that you're using the appropriate attacking types here, which is sometimes restrictive, but it adds a little bit of nuance and I think balance to the attack orders, that not everything is free reign when you do want to actually make an offensive motion. These 2 symbols, for those unfamiliar, the first, this up arrow, represents a shock unit. And then the second here, this NATO symbol for armor or tanks, represents tank units. Now, there's kind of these subtypes in the game. This is one of those instances where, because it has this tank or armor symbol, it can actually mean that it's specifically a regular tank armor division or unit, or it can be this mechanized armored unit, which we have pictured up here. So the symbol sometimes translates to multiple different definitions. Another great example you see is with the infantry symbol on some of the combat markers. It ultimately allows you to do, say, motorized infantry as well as regular infantry often. So just a little bit of nuance there. But as the Soviet player, we're going to execute this order from our initiative track. And we'll end up paying, the appropriate initiative and such on the action order phase sequence. But let's go through the actual combat here for everybody. Now, in this particular weather turn, the current weather is snow, and this has some modifiers. Most notably, that for tank and mechanized armored units, there is a +1 strength modifier for the attack. There's also a +1 for air superiority, and there's a -2 dice roll modifier for being the attacker in snow type weather. We'll come back to that later. Now, as the Soviet player, we've played this action order for attack, and first thing we need to do is designate what the primary unit in the attack is going to be. We want to try to take Stalingrad, which is this hex here, occupied by the 6th Infantry of the OKH forces. And we have two infantry units here across the Volga. Now, infantry unit types were not part of that order iconology, so we cannot actually use those to attack Stalingrad. However, we can use the mechanized armor 21st, 65th, 24th Division that we have here, which is to the northwest of the city, to conduct the attack. So we declare that this will be the primary attacker attacking into Stalingrad, who will be the defender. We also identify that these two infantry divisions, the 66, 62nd, and 68th, and the 64th, 57th, and 69th unit marker here, are going to be the flanking attackers. So that's a mechanic in combat here where you designate a primary attacker to kind of lead the charge. In other game systems, this might be, say, the action rating unit that you're leading the attack with, you know, the one you have to take losses with first, etc. And then these other units here are flanking or supporting the combat action. Now that we've declared who is attacking, from where, to which target hex, and what supporting units might be flanking in this particular battle, the Soviet player, us the active player, now have the opportunity to actually take a look at the cards in our hand and play cards. So the first thing that we can do is actually play a headquarters card, and we have the initiative to kind of do that first. The defender also has an opportunity here throughout the sequence to play cards from their hand, but we get to go first with this. And we're going to say that we want to play this card, and really the top half is what's most important, where we want to use the Stalingrad Southern Front, which can be used in turns 1 through 3. This is the beginning of a game, because this is kind of how the game sets up actually on the East Front. And what this represents is that we will be able to add 1 to our strength in the combat, but that we will also get a +1 dice roll modifier. So that's a pretty powerful card in this combat that we were able to play. And the OKH faction in this example, they declined to play a corresponding headquarter card. They don't have any in their hand. Next, as the Soviet player, we have the opportunity to play a combat card, which is just a different type of card. And we're going to use a winter warfare card. And I'm going to actually put this up just a little higher. This card can be played when we're initiating combat during snow weather turn. And if the Soviets are attacking, we get to actually make believe that the snow is non-existent, and we're going to treat the battle as if it was happening in fair weather. There's also some context there if you're playing this card as the defender as the Soviets, where you can actually make believe that the weather is mud-like, which modifies the combat results. So that card's being played, and this is really useful because you'll recall that we had in the snow weather card some modifiers, a DRM modifier -2 is the attacker in snow. When we look at the fair weather, we can actually see that attacker DRM goes away. We see that air superiority is actually worth more than it is in the snow. And then there's also some strength modifier for German armor units and non-German armor units. So the +1 for armor units that we would have received with snow, we still receive that in the fair weather. The difference here is that if it was attacking, the German armor would see benefit, and they are the defenders in this particular example. So now that we've played cards, and OKH is not going to play a combat card, they have one in their hand, but in this example they choose not to play it, we can now proceed to calculating what the combat strength is for the attacker and the defender, a step that is very common in most war game simulations. So the first thing that we're going to do is look at the strength of the primary attacking unit. And when you look at all of these counters, you see these pips in each orientation. And the orientation of pips that are on the top of the counter relate it to you as the player. So in this case, watching the video, the pips that are at the top of the counter represent the current strength of that unit. Our primary attacking unit, the 21st, 65th, 24th Division Mechanized Armor, has 2 pips at the top of their icon. So that means that their current attacking strength has a value of 2 because of those 2 pips. We also receive benefit in our strength calculation for flanking units. So here we see that we actually have a flanking unit coming across the Volga River from the northeast, and then we have a second coming from the east across the Volga. So each flanking unit adds a +1 to our combat strength. Next is that we get a +1 modifier for attacking in snow or fair weather with armor. So that is a +1 to our combat strength. And lastly, we have another +1 modifier to our strength because of that headquarters card that we played at the beginning of the combat sequence, giving us a +1 to strength. So in total, what this means is that we have an attacking strength of 6. Let's now walk through and calculate what the strength is for the OKH defenders in Stalingrad proper. First, we look at the defending unit itself, which is the 6th Infantry Division, and we see that it has 3 pips for 3 combat strength. If we had multiple combat units here in this hex, you would take the cumulative total of their pip strength to represent this value. So we're going to represent then 3 strength for the 3 pips on the 6th Infantry Division. We also have a +1 for having at least 1 German combat unit. That's a pretty generic modifier you'll get used to in the game. Just trying to represent, you know, the training and quality of most of the German forces. We also have a +1 for the defenders because they are defending in a city, a hex that has a city in it, and you can see these represented throughout the map. In the top left, for example, you see Voronezh is a city represented there on the map, obviously Stalingrad being a very large city. As a result of this, we see that the defender has a combat strength of 5. Next, we determine what the combat table column is for this result. And to do so, all we have to do is look at the attacker combined combat strength, which is 6, minus the defender combat strength, which is a 5. This, of course, with basic arithmetic, nets us to a standard 1. So +1 in the attacker's favor. All of these modifiers we went over can all be found on the player aid card for land combat. Very easy to reference as you actually play the game. And on that same player aid card, I just want to display real quick, we can see the actual combat table here, and we would be looking at this +1 column for this particular action because of the combat strength of the attacker minus the combat strength of the defender. Now that we've done that, we're actually going to now roll 2 dice, and we'll then apply a DRM, and we'll walk through what those DRMs are. In this particular example that we're playing through, we see that they roll a 5, and we have some dice roll modifiers we need to consider. First, from the HQ card that the Soviets played, we get a +1 in our favor because of the DRM listed on that card of +1. Second, there's an event card that's face up in the pending box that kind of begins the game, and this is for the Urals Industry Event card. That card, that event card for these Soviet combats here, they actually add a +1 modifier. So you have to always remember that on the board there may be different modifiers, especially in the event piles themselves, that give you different modifiers for the combat. So here we take that DRM and we apply it into effect. Now the other consideration is that we have this air unit here. Now just off camera, but you can just barely see it, we have this German air unit that's also represented, and that's sitting in 34 hex. Unfortunately, the German air unit is out of range of Stalingrad. It needs to be within 4 hexes, and in this particular case, Stalingrad is 5 hexes away. So the Soviets have air superiority for this battle. As a consequence of that, they receive a further +2 DRM to this combat. We normally would have had a -2 DRM for the combat given the snow weather. However, our combat card, Winter Warfare, took that modifier away. So you can see how beneficial that was. So we take the 5 that was rolled with dice, add it together with our DRM value of 4, and we then get to a 9, which we would reference here on the +1 combat table, and a 9 on the combat table for +1 is S01. So the first value are attacker losses, and the second value are defender losses. Now the S actually represents a specific case on the combat table that if the attacker is a Soviet force, they then actually receive 1 hit against them. So it's treated the same as a 1/1. So not that great, but it exists on the combat table to again kind of represent the Soviet forces' quality, strength, and some of the difficulties that they faced throughout the war. So a 1/1 is really the result that we have. 1 hit for the defender, 1 hit for the attacker. So next we need to resolve what the defender and attacker are going to do as a result of those combat results. The first thing that we need to look at is apply hits to the attacker. And you always have to, if you're the attacker with your primary force, and if it was armor, if possible, you have to then actually flip that to its other side, which in this case now makes this a regular infantry unit. That represents taking a hit to the unit. And we've now fulfilled then our 1 attacking result. Next, the OKH faction, they can take a step or it could retreat. It's the defender's preference or the defending player's preference. If they do retreat, there really aren't many options given the zone of control system that this game employs. This unit here is projecting a zone of control in the 6 surrounding hexes that it's neighboring, nothing unique about that. However, its zone of control exerts over these hex spines. So this unit is exerting a zone of control that prevents the 6th Infantry Division from retreating here to where this Romanian unit is because of this hex spine. Equally, the same thing is happening to the west of Stalingrad with this hex spine preventing the infantry unit from retreating to the 3rd Romanian Infantry Force. As a result, it can only retreat back here. Given how long the battle on the Eastern Front is going to continue and the flanking maneuvers the Soviets are presenting, the OKH faction player decides to take the retreat to fight another day at fuller force. Now the attacker has the ability to actually advance. In this case, they're going to advance with this unit that's in the northeast, logically probably because it's the one it's no longer on the front line and they want to maintain some line presence here, but also it does not come into conflict with any zone of control situations, and really you could do up to 2 units advancing after the battle. That really brings it to an end of this example of play. I hope this provided a good overview of the mechanics of combat, land combat at least, in Downfall, Conquest of the Third Reich. Again, the rulebook itself provides great examples of play. I'm just thinking that it might be good to get some of these in video format that others may enjoy, and that's what this is meant to be. I'll be conducting another video on the other 2 examples of play, and then following that we will have a full release of all of the, well, we'll be beginning the content of the Let's Play series that we're going to be walking through on the channel. Should you have any questions about land combat or the game in general, please do leave them in the comments section below. And as always, strategy gamers, hoping you have yourselves an excellent day. Bye now.